grade 9. Today we're going to be going over the N3 and N4 review from the packet that I sent last week, page 137 through 140. And what I'm going to ask you to do is make sure that you have it done before you watch this video. And then what I'll do is I will post a test. Now the test is not going to be marked the same way that it would have been if we were in the classroom. So it doesn't have a value to it in the same way. So don't panic about that part. It's just for you to be able to complete some culminating activity to see how you did in understanding N3 and N4. And this will mark the last kind of thing that we're going to do before the end of the school year. So this will be our last outcome is this test. So I'm going to go over the review, and then probably next week I will post that test. And you could even call it a mock test if that makes you feel better, because again, it's not for marks per se, okay? Okay, so it says to write each number as a decimal, and so you're going to need your calculator. And so you're going to take your top number and you're going to divide it by your bottom number in order to be able to turn it into a decimal. So 16 divides by 9 to give you 1.7 repeating. And so I'm going to put that 1.777. This would repeat, and then that's going to be a negative sign. Just put that back on. You don't even need that into your calculator, okay? And so you could round that off to 1.8, negative 1.8, or you could leave it as a repeating decimal, okay? 7 divided by 3 is going to be 2.3 repeating. And again, that negative then goes back on, so negative 2.3 repeating. And then this one right here, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to leave this negative 2 and just deal with the part that's a fraction. So 1 divides by 5 to give you a 0.2. So 1 divides by 5 turns into 0.2. But then you put that negative 2 back on it, and then you're going to put that 0.2. It's basically like you're adding negative 2 plus the 1.5, and so negative 2 plus 0.2. And keep in mind that the negative is on the outside, so that's why it ends up being negative 2.2 instead of a negative 1.8, because if you put that negative 2 plus the 0.2, then it would end up being a negative 1.8, but that's not right, right? The other option that you could have is you could turn it into, so option number 2 would be that you take that mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction. And so how we do that is we take the 2 and we times it by the 5, and then we add the 1. So 2 times 5 is 10, plus the 1 is 11, so that turns into 11. Keep the same denominator of 5, and if it was a negative before, it's a negative after. Now if you take the 11 and divide it by 5, you end up with the negative 2.2 as well. So both of those get you in the same place, but I find this way up here is easier because you're just dealing with that 1/5, you're turning that into a decimal, and then you're putting it back onto that negative 2. Okay? All right, it says find two rational numbers that are between negative 16 over 9 and negative 7 over 3. So before I would do that, there's a couple different things. First of all, I'm going to look and see what these are when they turn them into decimals. So 16 divides by 9. I guess we already have it up here. So negative 1.8. And then this is negative 2.3. And so when I look down here on my number line, this number line has been divided up into 10 parts, I think. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So between the whole numbers, or in this case the integers, there are 10 parts. So that would mean that this is a negative 1.1, negative 1.2, negative 1.3, negative 1.4, and negative, I'm just going to put negative 1.5 because I don't really have a lot of room to put all of that stuff in there. But keeping that in mind, that once they've divided that up into tenths, and that would be the easiest way to do that. So if you ever were asked to make a number line, this would be the easiest way to do it, because when you're dealing with fraction or decimals, that first place after the decimals, of course, tenths. So that means that the whole numbers are divided up into tenths. If you had another place, it'd be hundredths. And so you'd take these and divide them up into each of these little places into 10, and then you'd have 100 little ones in between there. That would take you a good long time to do. But all right, so I'm going to grab a different color pen, and I'm going to draw in there where negative 1.8 is. So this is the negative 1.1, negative 1.2, negative 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. This is my negative 1.8. And then 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. This is my negative 2.12. This is my negative 2.3 right there. Okay? Two rational numbers that are between, well, that one's already given to us, so let's do negative 2, and another one that's in between, that's a negative 2.1. Let's try that one. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know, got somebody up there who's probably thinking, oh, I thought of this one. How about this one, Mrs. Lawrence? Negative 1.81111111. Well, is that one after that one? Yes, it is. It is, right? So that would work. You know, if you want to do something like that and be creative, go for it. Now it says to order these numbers from least to greatest. So all the ones that are written as fractions, I would first turn them into decimals before I did anything else. So this negative 3 4/5 would turn into a negative 3.8, because 4/5 is a 0.8, and so that's going to be a negative 3.8. And then the negative 7 halves is going to be a negative 3.5, right? So 7 divided by 2 is 3.5, and of course it's negative. Okay, so then this one right here, they've got this divided up into, this is didn't photocopy very well, but this is negative 3 and this is negative 4. And so again, this is divided up into 10 equal parts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And of course, you don't have to do it that way, but that's probably the easiest way to do it. So negative 3.5 would be negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. This one's right here. And the negative 3.8 is going to be this one right here. Okay, so we did those two. Those ones are out of the way. And then the negative 3.9 is going to be this one right here. And the negative 3.3, that's 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 is right there. Look at how much easier that was when they were all written as decimals. So from least to greatest, well, when they're negatives, the least is actually the bigger number because it's a negative, right? So this is the least on up to the greatest. So negative 3.3 is greater than negative 3.9, right? It's like saying you have a debt. This one is, you're further in debt, and so that means you have less money. The more in debt you are, the less money you have. All right. Next one, calculate each sum. So what we did with this one is we just used our calculator to do this. So that's a negative 2.1. So on your calculator, you're going to go to 2.1, put the negative sign on it, plus 4.8 is a 2.7, right? And it's positive, and that makes sense because if you're, $2 and a dime in the hole, and then you earn $4.80, you got to pay back that $2.10. All you have left is $2.70. So it's essentially like taking $4.80 and subtracting the $2.10, right? So 25.6 plus a negative 18.9 is the same thing as subtracting 18.9. So some people will say, well, can't I just say, well, because I have a positive and a negative side by side, they turn into a negative? Yep. So 25.6 subtract 18.9 would give you the same answer of 6.7. Okay. Negative 6.4 plus a negative 3.8 is going to end up being a negative 10.2. And again, that makes sense because you've got a debt and then you're adding more debt. So you get further in debt. And it's not like when you have a negative and a negative, that they become a positive. No, this is adding and subtracting. That doesn't happen, right? Now, I know you're thinking, well, you just told me up here, adding and subtracting, and that's right, but there's nothing in between. There are no numbers in between, right? They're side by side. That's why we do that. All right, now, if we're talking about fractions, we have a different method, right? We have to take this and turn it into a fraction that has a common denominator. So this is going to be between a 4 and an 8. The easiest one is definitely an 8. And so I'm going to have a negative 6 over 8 because I times both of them by 2. And then I'm going to take and I'm just going to add my tops. I'm going to keep my bottoms. So negative 1 plus negative 6 is a negative 7. Keep the 8. Okay. And then over here, next one, if I have a 3 and a 12, the common denominator that I should use should be 12 because I can times this one by 4 and get that up to 12. So that'll be negative 16 over 12. And then if I have negative 16 and I add 11, now I'm at negative 5 and I'm still keeping the 12. Okay. All right. Now, this one's interesting how they did this. So they took these and they dealt with the whole numbers first, and then they dealt with the fractions. Now, one of the things that we did is we took this and we turned them into those mixed numbers and turned them into improper fractions. I think that's probably the easiest way to deal with that. So I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to go negative 1 times 3 plus 2 is negative 5 over 3 plus, and then this is 2 times 9 is 18 plus the 8 is 26 over 9. And then I'm going to get a common denominator. So times this guy by 3. And he's a negative 15 plus 26 over 9. And then, you know, a lot of kids will do this. They'll say, well, if I have a negative 15 and a plus 26, can I just change those around? Yeah, you can. As long as you take the sign with them. So he's a positive 26 and he's a negative 15. You can absolutely move those around. And that makes it easier for a lot of kids because they go, well, I can do 26 subtract 15 in my head. That's going to be 11 over 9. Okay, so I'm just going to take this guy and I'm just going to do it that way. Okay, so that's page 137 of your review. If you get stuck, pause it and go back and watch it again. All right, now number 5 on the top of page 138. So they're kind of getting started. So they've taken this negative and the negative and they've turned them into a positive. See that right there? And so now at this point you have to get a common denominator of 12. So that's going to be negative 7 over 12 plus 8 over 12, which is going to be a positive 1 over 12. Okay? And this one right here, they are expecting you to change that mixed number into an improper fraction. So 2 times 7 is 14 plus 1 is 15. And then at this point we have to get a common denominator. And when you think about a 5 and a 7, there's not really a really obvious one that jumps out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to times this guy by 7 and times this guy by 5. And I think that is probably actually my lowest common multiple. So he's going to be 21. And that's going to be plus a negative, what's that? 15 times 25, 75 over 35. So 15 times 5, yep, 75. So then I'm going to have 21 subtract 75. Notice that if I have a plus and a minus side by side, I can just put in my calculator subtract. So 21 subtract 75 is negative 54 over 35. I'm going to divide that by the 35 just to check what that is as a decimal, so that if you have a different answer and you're checking to see, did I get that right? Take your top number and divide it by your bottom number and see if you got the same thing as I did as a decimal. You could do the same thing with 1/12 as well. So 1 divided by 12 is 0.83 repeating. And you can check that and just see if you got the same answer as I did. Okay, next one. So this one's going to be 3 times 10 plus 1 is 31 over 10, and then put the negative sign back on. Remember, when you're changing from a mixed number to an improper fraction, just forget the negative sign for a bit, and then deal with the 3 times 10 plus the 1, get your 31, and then put it back over 10. Then put your negative back on, okay? 1 times 5 is 5 plus the 3 is 8. So then at this point we need a common denominator. 10 is nice and easy. So negative 31. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that into a minus 16 over 10. So that's going to end up being negative 47 over 10. And of course, anytime you divide by 10, it's just going to be like moving the decimal back. So that's going to be a negative 4.7. So you want to check that on your calculator and see if you got the same thing. All right, this table, it says, shows the elevations of several places on the Earth. On Mount Everest, it's 8,849.7 meters, keeping in mind that if you're better with feet than meters, there's about 3 1/3 feet in a meter, in 1 meter. So it's, you know, if you can think about what an average man is, about 6 feet tall, a meter's about half of a man, about half, okay? Mount Logan, I'm not sure where that is, 5,959 and 1.1. Death Valley is in the hole, so it's under sea level, because if you have elevation is all in relation to sea level. So if you think about, like, you know, here's the ocean, this would be considered 0 meters, and then you have your mountains, okay? And so anything up here, so this is Mount Everest right here, so this is going to be 8,849.7 meters above the sea level. And then Death Valley is like down here, below sea level, is negative 410.9 meters. Okay, so this is down here. So there must be some mountains in between so that the ocean doesn't, like, just, you know, right down into Death Valley. But so that's how that kind of works. Everything is in relation to the ocean sea level. All right, the Dead Sea is negative 417.3. It says, write a subtraction sentence that represents the difference in the elevations of the given locations. Then calculate the difference. Okay, so Mount Logan is 5,959.1, and the Dead Sea is a negative 417.3. So notice that if you have two negatives side by side, it becomes a positive. So it's 5,959.1 plus 417.3. And so 59.1 plus 417.3. We have a difference of 6,376.4 meters. That's the difference between, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to move that up a little bit, don't I? Okay, so Mount Logan was 5,959.1. The Dead Sea was negative 417. I'm getting that information from up here. And then you have two negatives side by side make for a positive. And then that means that the difference between Mount Logan, let's say this is Mount Logan up here, and the Dead Sea, is a difference of 6,376.4 meters. Okay, the Death Valley and the Dead Sea, the difference is, okay, so you got negative 410.9, and then you got negative 417.3. Okay, so then they've got the two negatives side by side. So they turn that into a negative, or into a positive, excuse me. So negative 410.9 plus 417.3 means you're only talking about a difference of 6.4 meters. All right, now the difference between Mount Logan and Mount Everest. Okay, so Mount Everest is 8,849.7. Mount Logan is 5,959.1. And so okay, so they've got a bit of a typo there, because there's no negative in between these two, so that should stay a subtract. So 8,849.7, 5,959.1. I'm not sure why they made that. That probably messed some of you up when you were doing this review. Like, why did they turn that into a positive? Oops, 8,849.7 subtract 5,959.1 is a difference of 2,890.6. The difference in the elevation, 2,890.6 meters. Mount Everest is that much taller, is 2,890.6 meters taller than Mount Logan. All right, the next one says, what is the sign in each product of each product? So the product is the answer when you multiply. Okay, so all it's asking for is what's going to be the sign of it. It's not even asking for the actual answer yet. So we have a negative and a negative. So remember, if you have two same signs, here's our little rules. Two same signs. This is for multiplying and division only. Two same signs, positive. Two different signs, negative. Okay, so we have two same signs being multiplied, so that means my product will be positive. We have two different signs here, because this is positive, this is negative, it's going to be negative. We have two same signs, positive, two different signs, negative. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Next page, 139. Now we're actually going to find the product. Okay, so remember when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply the top by the top and then the bottom by the bottom. So it's going to be a negative 2 times negative 11 and the 5 times the 20. I always associate the negative signs, even though he's out here in the middle. I'm going to put him on the top every time, okay? So negative 2 times negative 11. I'm not sure why they're giving us one more line. Honestly, we don't even need it. So he's going to be a positive 22 over 100. And because 5 times 20 is 100 and 2 times 11 is 22. And so, and you could reduce that by dividing both by, oh, that's exactly what they're at. That's what this was about reducing in the question, but we don't need to do that. 11 over 50. Okay, so if you decided that you wanted to reduce in the question, then you would be dividing this by 2 and this by 2. This one they wouldn't be able to cross reduce. But we decided that we weren't going to do a lot of cross reductions. I think we had a couple people who did them, but most of us didn't do that, okay? And that's fine. All right, so then here we're going to do negative 4 over 5, 25 over 12. Okay, we're just going to go jump right here. So 4 times 25 is going to be negative 100. 5 times 12 is going to be 60. And whenever they both have a 0 on the end, you can just divide them both by 10, which is going to end up being negative 10 over 6. And then he can be reduced even further by dividing both by 2. So he's going to end up being negative 5 over 3. Okay, next one. This one right here, before we can move on, we have to take this mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction. So 1 times 3 plus 1 is 4. And then it's going to be negative 15 times the 4 and 16 times the 3. And so 15 times 4 is negative 60. And then 16 times 3 is going to be, well, 10 times 3 is 30. 6 times 3 is 18. So it's going to be 48. And then they both divide by 2. So that's going to end up being negative 30 over 24. And then they both divide by 2 again. Negative 15 over 12. And then they both divide by 3. So that's going to be 5 over 4. Which means that from the very beginning, they both would have divided by 12. 2 times 2 is 4. Times 3 is, yeah. So if I wanted to, I could have divided this by 12 and this by 12, and then I would have gotten right to the 5/4. Okay. Next one. 3 times 3 plus the 2 is 11/3. 2 times 11 is 22 plus the 3 is 25/11. So I'm going to take the -11/3 and -25/11. Remember, I always take those negatives that are in the front. I always put them on my top. Okay, so then I'm going to take this and times the 11 times the 25, and that's going to end up being 275. Remember that two negatives, two same signs make for a positive, and then 3 times 11 is 33. And so if you want to check and see if you got the same thing, that would turn into, as a decimal, 8.3 repeating. And I'm not going to bother looking for a common factor that can divide into both of them. I kind of don't know that there is one. Well, 275 divides by 11 though, doesn't it? Yeah. So I guess you could do this one, divide by 11, divide by 11. So that would be 25/3. And 25 divides by 3 to give you 8.3 is repeating as well. So I guess that does reduce without too much trouble, because right up here, if I wanted to cross reduce, I could have just divided both of those by 11, and cross reducing would have been really easy there. All right, next one. It says circle the most reasonable answer. All right, so if I have nearly 30 times about 5, so 30 times 5, well, 3 times 5 is 150, or 3 times 5 is 15, so 30 times 5 is 150. So the most reasonable answer is this guy right there. And then this is nearly 6, or let's say 5. Let's say 5 is closer to 5, and this is nearly 1, or even half. So half of 5 would be about 2.5. So the only one that's even close to 2.5 is this guy right here. This guy's way too big, he's way too small. All right, this one right here, 300 times 3, so that's going to be about 900. The only one here that's reasonable is this guy. And then 37.5 times 1.6, so this is about, 1.5. So let's say 2 times 35. If we said 2 times 35, that would be 70. So this guy's is the most reasonable answer. All right, so how did I do that? I'm just rounding them to close to what they are. Okay, a diver descends at a speed of 0.8 meters per minute. How far does the diver descend in 3.5 minutes? The diver's descent is 0.6 meters times the 3.5. Okay, so the product is, so we take the 0.8 times it by the 3.5, and we say 2.8. Multiply the whole numbers. So they're saying approximately 1 times about 4 is 4. Estimate, and yeah. Anyway, I think a lot of this stuff right here, honestly, is, to me, it gets confusing. It confuses me. I'm sure it's confusing some of you because I'm not exactly sure what they're asking for in here, but I can answer this one, the product, and basically what we're doing up here is the same kind of idea. We just took this and figured out what it was approximately. And so I rounded them up to the nearest whole numbers. Whole numbers are, no decimals, no fractions, and just figured out an estimate. So, the diver is descending 2.8 meters in 3.5 minutes. That's good enough. Okay. All right, last page. Dividing. So dividing means that you have to take that second fraction. If you're dividing fractions, you have to take the second fraction, you have to flip it to its reciprocal, so it's going to be 10/7. Be still negative. And notice how the dividing sign became a multiplying. And now at this point, we just keep on going the way we've been doing. So top by top, bottom by bottom. And so that's the answer. I can divide both of those by 5, so I can reduce it, -2/7. Okay, over here, so -3/5 times -7/12, and then top by top is going to be 21, bottom by bottom is going to be 60. And they will both divide by 3, 7/20. Okay. Now, last question says evaluate each expression. This is an N4 kind of question where you've got multiple things going on. So you got to remember your bed mass. Okay, so brackets, exponents, dividing and multiplying whichever comes first, and then adding and subtracting whichever comes first. So in this question, what's going to come first is going to be this part right here. And take that negative with him. So it's going to be a -3.1 times the 7 is going to be a -21.7. They already have the negative written down for you. Okay. And again, I have no idea why they've switched that to a negative, to a positive sign. They shouldn't have. That's a mistake. That's a typo. Okay, so 1.1 subtract 21.7 should be a negative. Oh, I know what they're doing. I know exactly what they're doing, guys. So they put the plus negative because they mean the same thing. So for some of you who might think this is how I like to think about it, I want to say 1.1 plus a negative 21.7. I would never do that. That's why I just didn't even think of it that way. But so if you had a positive and then you added a debt, then you'd be way in debt, right? Of 20.6. There we go. That's exactly what they were thinking. I guess it wasn't a typo. All right, next one. So up here we've got this division part, and then we also have brackets. So we've got to do inside the brackets, inside these brackets first. So that means I'm going to do, those two negatives are going to make it for a positive. So 5.1. And notice they've just got this all written back down because they haven't dealt with that yet. So 5.1 plus the 2.9 is going to be 8. And then, still got everything written down, and then we've got to move to this part, that's the division. So 1.8 divides by 3 to give you, 1.8 divides by 0.3 to give you a 6. And that you've got two negatives, two same signs. So two same signs make for a positive. Okay, so then the answer is 14. Okay, moving along, 2 more questions. All right, so now here we've got multiplying and then we've got the adding. So we're going to have to do this multiplying first. So 5 times 1 is going to be a -5, and 6 times 4 is going to be 24. And then they've just got this part written back down. So -5/24, and then I'm going to get myself a common denominator because now I'm doing the adding part. So -5/24 plus 10/24. And then -5 plus 10 is a positive 5/24. Basically taking all that you've been doing and putting it all together. Okay, now again, in this very last question, we've got to do the division part before we can do the adding part. So they've taken this second one and they're flipping it to the reciprocal. And so that's why it wasn't dividing and now it's multiplying. So 2 times -9/8 is going to be a -18/24. And then now we've got that part done. Now they just keep writing that part down, and now we're going to deal with that. So 1 times 4 is 4 plus the 3 is 7. And -18/24, get a common denominator of 24. So it's going to be 42/24. Those two side by side will make for a negative. And then 42 subtract 18 is, if it was 42 subtract 20, it would be 22, but it's subtract 18, so it's 24. Do I have that right? 42 subtract 18. Yep, 24 over 24, which is the same thing as 1. Okay. All right. Okay, grade 9. So that's it for the review. Hopefully that video was helpful. And I'm just going to encourage you that if you need more review before you do the mock test next week, that you look on pages 144 through 146. There's lots of review there in the textbook, and all the answers are there at the back. If you would, if you don't have a textbook at home and you can't get a friend to take a picture of it, then just let me know, and I will add that on the team chat. Okay, so I'll wait to hear from you before I do that, though. So let me know if you need that those textbook pages because you want more review. Okay, and good luck.